Thank you, and good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this webinar today. As just indicated, we're going to talk about our recent announcement, our exciting announcement on reimbursement pricing in the US for PromarkerD and the Australian regulatory decision that we announced at the same time. I'll give a brief overview of that announcement now. And the key point with the US is reimbursement. So this is a major regulatory, reimbursement hurdle for us that we've overcome. The key part in the US is getting the broad payers engaged. And the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid have announced a payment rate of $390 in the US. Now, CMS is the largest payer for healthcare. The Medicare covers people aged over 65. Medicaid covers eligible low-income Americans, and together they account for over 100 million Americans, 42% of the population. In parallel, we've announced that the Australian regulator, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, has advised it will not include PromarkerD in the Australian Register for Therapeutic Goods, and this is primarily due to the change in manufacturer that we've had as part of that process of producing the kit to international standards in Europe. It's important to note that the TGA decision, that regulatory decision, does not impact our activities in our primary markets of the United States and Europe. I'm sure you're all aware of the content of the announcement, so I won't go further into that. Instead, I'll pass on to our investor relations side, and Dirk van Dissel will ask a number of questions that we've had submitted. Thanks, Dirk.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. On today's call, we're only addressing questions relating to Friday's announcement. And yes, there will be a recording of this webinar made available on the company's website. A number of questions were repeated, so we have combined or condensed these questions to improve the flow of the webinar. Richard, the first question relates to the CMS pricing process. What are the next steps following the CMS pricing determination?
Yes, it's useful to understand this whole process and how it comes about. So as we indicated, we obtained a unique pricing code, what is known as a proprietary analysis PLA code for PromarkerD at the beginning of this year. So that's a unique code that allows us, through our partner Sonic Healthcare USA, to charge for the test. That code had a price set towards it and announced in the last week of September. That pricing is a preliminary determination. It's very unusual for that price to change from that point. There is a period of public comment, which is standard practice. And after that period, the pricing will become final, and then it becomes effective from the beginning of January 2024. So when we say effective, that means that any provider, in this case, Sonic Healthcare, can offer the test with that code, with that set price. So it's a really important milestone.
The next question refers to the 30-day period for public comment, and you've in part already answered this, Richard. How rare is it for there to be changes to the pricing as a result or during this feedback period?
It's extremely unusual, as is appropriate for any new test coming to market. There is a period of public consultation and discussion. It's really intended to allow for controversial tests coming through, or potentially unusual areas which may merit a more extensive exploration. We don't believe that's the case for PromarkerD and this pricing of $390. So obviously the process will play out, and the pricing we will be able to make a statement in approximately 6 weeks.
Thank you. The next question is, how does the crosswalk pricing process work? How was the crosswalk test determined?
So this process and we were guided strongly by Sonic Healthcare and their reimbursement team. There are two ways of obtaining a price for a test. One is crosswalk, which is what we've done. The second one is gap fill, or also known as de novo pricing, which is a process that which we didn't go down. So the crosswalk is an opportunity to look at existing tests on the market that do similar things to the intended purpose of PromarkerD. And what we were able to identify is a test for another chronic disease, in this case cardiovascular disease, that used a similar technology platform in, again, an immunoassay that potentially would give similar benefit to patients. And so it provided a very good model for PromarkerD, and the decision was made that we would benchmark our test against that. And so that's where that pricing has come from, and that process of crosswalk is one of aligning the benefits of the test. Now, obviously for PromarkerD, we're in a unique position because there are extensive additional benefits being a predictive test, that we can intervene much earlier, that we'll be able to save healthcare costs in terms of preventing people going towards dialysis or kidney transplant. And that whole economic health benefit modeling is data that we've talked to before, and that we will present again in conferences in the coming months to really show the benefit of the test. So that's a long answer to saying that the crosswalk pricing has been achieved. Underpinning that is a very large data set that supports the benefit of having a test at $390 US.
Thank you. What are the next steps regarding attaining additional coverage in the US? When will Sonic engage with the private payers or insurers to gain access to the other 58% of the US market?
So in answering that question, I'll also expand a bit further on the next steps as a consequence of having CMS pricing. So CMS is a national body, but the payment for the test is then covered through 12 regional groups that each are able to set their own budgets. And so each of them will, in due course, be asked to approve reimbursement of the test in their market. So that's a standard process. So we engage through Sonic Healthcare with each of those bodies, and that will give a local determination to set to agree the reimbursement in each jurisdiction. And so, for example, Sonic reference Laboratories' primary site is in Texas, and so the first place that would be engaged is the body that covers the Texas region. And then that moves through the different parts of the US. Then the separate aspect is the private payers, meaning the private insurance. They benchmark off of this CMS pricing, and then the process is one of Sonic Healthcare engaging with their network of insurers. And obviously they're a big company, they've already got this network, they know the majority of insurers very well, and so they're able to engage with those insurers, and it is on an individual basis. And so it is not the most efficient process in the world, but it is certainly an effective process. And so each of the private payers is then asked to agree to reimburse the test. And because we have the CMS pricing, that's a much easier question and answer for the insurers. Again, we have that big body of evidence, the dossier of economic health benefit that we can supply to each of the private payers as required. And the way it will work is that, as I said, that benchmark price of $390 is used as the primary guide. The private insurers, depending on their size, may discount against that a little bit. But in the main, this will be close to a floor price for the test for the next 2 to 3 years. And to expand on that, this pricing, the CMS pricing, is reviewed every 3 years. And the process is to look at what the average price paid by the private market over that 3-year period, and then to discount that $390. The maximum discount is 15%. So we can look forward to a higher level price for PromarkerD for the foreseeable future, much higher than we originally were anticipating in our previous guidance.
That's certainly some good news, and thanks for clarifying that, Richard. Do you think the pricing will enable PromarkerD to become the gold standard test in the US?
Yes, we do. The reason for that is that whilst $390 is expensive by Australian standards, it's certainly not expensive by US standards. We have a test which can change the way that patients with diabetes and kidney disease are managed, and we're offering a relatively cost-effective test. There are a couple of other tests that groups are bringing to market in the US that are attempting to predict diabetic kidney disease, and obviously we're very confident that our test has got better clinical data behind it. But as a minimum, that $390 price is much more cost effective than any other tests that groups are trying to bring through. So that offers an opportunity for us to get substantial market uptake. The test will be more expensive than the existing standard of care. The existing gold standard is what we've talked about before, these simple blood tests for kidney disease, the estimated glomerular filtration rate, or eGFR, or the simple urine test, the ACR. But it's very important to recognize that those tests are only simple diagnostic tests and they're not very efficient. So we are looking to replace that standard of care with a better standard of care. And we've certainly got really positive feedback from key opinion leaders in the US and from events that we've done in Australia, really indicating that there's a need for this sort of test. And I'm happy to talk more about that.
Right. That sort of covers off the next question, which was, do key opinion leaders share the company's view that PromarkerD can be a gold standard test? So we'll take that as a yes. And as you said, Richard, very important to note that that PromarkerD is predictive, not a simple diagnostic.
Yes, and I think it's worth expanding on that to really emphasize what the key opinion leaders and groups around the world are looking at here. For example, Kidney Research UK recently put out a big study showing that the kidney disease was going to in part bankrupt, but in part just dismember the UK healthcare system because of the number of people who will have dialysis or kidney transplant in the future, and that the system simply can't cope. So they are, in the UK, Kidney Research UK are describing it as a public health emergency, that if something is not done, then the systems won't cope. Now, we're not quite in that situation in Australia, but we are in that situation in the US. And so there are government bodies there that are fully cognizant of making a change and doing something now. And obviously the key opinion leaders are the drivers for that, to say we need to change the way we're doing it, and we need tests like PromarkerD.
Right. Maybe we'll just take a few questions here talking about the TGA decision, and if you could just maybe shed some light on that, Richard, and then talk about what impact, if any, as certainly we view that as immaterial in what the company's trying to achieve with its sales and commercialization plans in US and Europe. But if you could just shed some light on that, and how that would impact or does not impact on the other parts of the business.
Yes, yeah, important to address that. Obviously, it's not the news that we were anticipating, and we are disappointed with the TGA decision. It's primarily a technical one. So the decision is not to approve the PromarkerD test, the immunoassay, as we currently are manufacturing it. And the data set that was the primary challenge for the TGA in their review was that we submitted data from the development and earlier validation studies of PromarkerD, with all of our published work, but that wasn't on earlier manufactured versions of the test. And it was usual practice to do that and get the test approved in the form that it was available at the time. roll on 1 or 2 years, change manufacturers, and then apply for amendments. There has been a change with the TGA's process. It's not a written change, but it's become evident that in the last few months that they've not allowed that review process to play out in the same way, and they've made much more short-term decisions. So long story short, we need to submit data on our current version of the test. Now that's the European manufactured version, the ISO 13485 version as it's known. That is our current product. That's what we've been manufacturing in Europe for the last several months, and very strong processes behind that. And that's the product that will be provided around the world. And so we're now considering our best options in terms of addressing the TGA's concerns. In terms of the impact, it's important to note that TGA only affects Australia. Yes, home market is one where we'd like to bring the test forward. We believe that Australians should have access to the test as well. But from a straight business perspective, Australia has 1.5 million people with diabetes. The US has 32 million people with diabetes, and we're bringing the test to the US under the Laboratory Developed Test, or LDT framework. And that's a process that we're continuing with. That's not impacted at all by the TGA decision. And in Europe, we already have registration of the test with CE mark, and so we can sell the test in Europe as is. So yes, it's a blip. It does affect near-term plans in Australia. It doesn't affect our primary activities in our major markets.
Thank you. Now we'll swing the questions back towards companies' plans in the US. How does US pricing decision impact on other markets or in other markets?
US is the benchmark. The price that you get for a diagnostic or a drug in the US will nearly always be the highest price you'll get anywhere in the world, and other markets will discount from there. So the positive side of things is we have that reimbursement pricing, so that encourages other markets to adopt the test. The pricing decision or the price point, it's a great outcome. If we start to discount from that to Europe will discount a little bit, markets like Australia will discount a lot compared to US pricing. Even with those discounts, we're still going to achieve pricing levels of which we feel are appropriate for a test of this type. And so the short answer is that the pricing decision is going to favorably impact other markets, because it will let us bring the test through at a healthy price point in all the jurisdictions that we anticipate being in the near term.
Right. Richard, can you shed some light on the logistics and timing of the rollout of the test in the US now that you've achieved this favorable pricing decision?
I can talk at a high level about the plans for the US rollout. I can't go into specifics because this is the realm of our partner Sonic Healthcare USA, and their activities are private to them. What we've indicated is that we're looking for a soft launch in this year and a firm launch on the back of this CMS pricing early next year. It's obviously going to be a stepped or staged launch in whatever form that we go forward, meaning it's going to go from a smaller number of users and regions, and we're going to step up into larger numbers of users and larger regions over time. The benefit of working with Sonic Healthcare USA is that they know the process. It's well established for them that they have a series of milestones and KPIs that they need to meet from our perspective, and obviously from their own for that rollout. They're all sensible ones, as you'd expect. simple questions around what's the marketing plan, how do we engage with users. They have 300 or 400 reps, they have their own pathologists, they have their own network. So there's an easy adoption path there through existing users of Sonic Healthcare services. It is about promoting PromarkerD to the US, and we have our clinical advisory board, Sonic have their clinical advisory board, and KOLs. The engagement with them is all current. And again, the strategy for rolling the test out is the simple one that you'd expect. What I can't talk to is forecasts on sales volume. As we've indicated all along, we simply don't know. We're going from a test where we're currently selling 0 to a market where there's 32 million people with diabetes who could all potentially benefit from the test. So it's an exciting opportunity, but we can't talk about forecasts. What we can say based on that pricing is if we can achieve 1 million sales in terms of 1 million users in the next few years, that is obviously good revenue for all, and we believe that that pricing of $390 US with a potential for 1 million sales at some point is an incentive for everybody to strive to get the test into patients' hands as soon as possible.
Great. Well, thanks, Richard. That sort of covers off some of the other questions here, so I will skip forward. This one's a bit more of a technical question, and I'll read it out. How does the FDA's proposed amendment to update the definition of in vitro diagnostic products to make explicit that IVDs are devices under the FD and C Act impact proteomics, given PromarkerD is a LDT or lab developed test? Does this affect our agreement with Sonic?
So I'll take those two parts completely separately. The simple answer is it doesn't impact our agreement with Sonic. But to talk to the recently announced, so last week the FDA put forward some proposed amendments to its rules. It's very early stages in that process. There are two bodies that govern use of diagnostics in the US, CLIA, which is the clinical laboratories and the act under which they operate, and the FDA for regulating some medical devices. CLIA has been around for 20 or 30 years. It's a very strong organization, and it has a very strong framework in place for governing, bringing out new diagnostic tests and bringing them to market quickly. It's a very well-respected body, and it's got a strong backing from Congress for its innovation and its ability to deliver tests quickly. The FDA has primarily been focused on the drug side of things, but it is looking to extend its reach. Being open, I believe that there's an element of turf war between the two bodies. That's been going on for many, many years. There's going to be groups far larger than us will be determining which way this plays. But the near-term impact and the near-term discussion is the FDA's is a proposal. There's no time frame under which they might be able to bring this forward. Second point is that there's a question whether they actually have authority to bring it forward. So there's substantial doubt as to where the FDA will go in this. And separately, Congress is also looking at how it believes this area should be governed. And obviously, US Congress is a very efficient organization, and I'm sure they will come to a swift decision on this, or more likely it will continue to operate under the status quo for a long time yet.
Okay. We'll skip forward to a few other questions we've sort of already answered. In your view, Richard, does the higher price of the test, i.e. the $390 US versus the company's originally quoted $150 US per test, potentially lead to a slower uptake of the test from the medical fraternity?
I think for the US, it's important to recognize that this is not an expensive test. The objective for us is to get the test out quickly, and the economic health benefit side is very easy to demonstrate. One test, be that at $390 US or other, if that can stop one person ending up with dialysis, which is a $78,000 US exercise per year, it's going to be an enormous saving. So yes, on straight macroeconomics, the higher the price, the less the demand. But we think this is a fair price, and we don't think it's a barrier to entry. We think it's an opportunity to bring the test forward quickly and at an affordable price point by US standards. And it's still beneficial for everyone involved, meaning the payers, the healthcare system, are going to save money by bringing this test in. They're not going to lose money by bringing it in at this price point. And so we're not expecting substantial differences to the forecast sales and sales growth in the initial phases of the test based on this price.
Thank you. And the last question to finish with, given there are approximately 32 million people in the US with type 2 diabetes, and the KOLs believe PromarkerD can be a gold standard test, how many people does the company believe could be getting tested annually by PromarkerD at some stage in the future?
That's a how long is a piece of string question. Obviously, somewhere between 0 and 32 million is the target number. The majority of patients with type 2 diabetes are tested with existing standard of care tests every 1 to 2 years. And so existing standard of care tests are your cholesterol, your blood sugar levels, and your existing kidney status, so your eGFR. If we said approximately 2/3 of the patients know they've got diabetes, so that's about 20 million who are tested reasonably regularly. There's a number there in the millions of the people who could reasonably be expected to be using PromarkerD in the foreseeable future. So we're not going to give any forecasts, but we don't think it's tens of thousands of people are going to be using the test. There's the potential for it being millions in the US, and the US obviously is the benchmark market opportunity. Europe has over 60 million people with diabetes, and it's worth emphasizing that we think bringing the test forward in the US is going to advance our opportunities and our efforts to bring the test forward into Europe. And then there's obviously other markets around the world where there are many millions of people who could benefit. We're talking about over 450 million people worldwide with diabetes, and a test that could potentially benefit all of them. So there's an opportunity there for big numbers in the future.
Thank you, Richard. Well, that finishes the pre-submitted questions part of this webinar. Unless I've missed anything, Richard, there you want to talk to?
No, I think that's key. And what I'd like to finalize or to sum up with is the CMS pricing, the Centers for Medicaid Services, is a really important milestone for Proteomics International and the PromarkerD test for bringing it to market. Reimbursement pricing is the requirement for the US. It's much more important than regulatory. You've got to find somebody who will pay for the test. So this was the most exciting milestone for us, following on the back of Sonic Healthcare signing the agreement to bring the test forward. So that opens up the US market. With the US market open, then that brings into play the other markets that we're talking about, and we look forward to talking more about Europe and our activities there, and other key markets around the world, other major markets in the months ahead. And I'll leave it there. We're excited about where we're at, and it's a very, very positive endorsement of the PromarkerD test from an important body in the US.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'd like to thank everyone for joining today's webinar and for everyone that submitted questions. And also thanks again, Richard, to you, the team at Proteomics and the board for all the hard work that you've done in achieving this very, very important milestone. And if anyone else has any further questions that were missed, please just direct them to either myself or Richard via our emails. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you all for dialing in. Appreciate your time.